Hey, what's up guys? I just made the switch from the iPhone 14 Pro to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. You guys probably recall 2 weeks ago I made an unboxing video of the 14 Pro discussing that phone. However, it just wasn't doing it for me. It wasn't getting through my day-to-day life, and there was one major problem with it: battery life. And that is why I decided to switch to its bigger brother, the 14 Pro Max right here in space black. This to me is the best iPhone in the lineup, and I'm going to tell you why. Let's get into it. Okay, so the biggest reason for me switching to the 14 Pro Max, like I said, battery life. Battery life on the 14 Pro just wasn't going up to my standard. I found that after 5 hours of use, which included some phone calls, a couple emails, some YouTube videos, just day-to-day basic tasks, I was draining that phone down to about 15% battery. And as a pro user, buying a phone which is targeted to that market with those very powerful cameras, in fact running this entire YouTube channel with those cameras, going down to 15% after 5 hours of basic tasks was not very good at all. And it's unfortunate because I really did like the 14 Pro in terms of its size, and it was extremely easy to use. However, with this phone, I have gone through about 7 hours of battery life throughout the day and only draining it down to about 60%, which means I've still got a whole nother 40% left to go. That within itself shows that this is actually a 2-day smartphone, and that to me is what you call a pro device, and I don't even have to worry about carrying a power bank with me. So battery life is phenomenal. However, I have to say there are definitely some really big problems with this phone. So let's check those out. But first, we got to change the scenery for that. Okay, so there are a lot of problems with this phone. Number one, the size. The size of this thing is exactly why a lot of people are not choosing the Max and switching to the regular Pro. I have found when walking around on the street and using this phone, you really cannot use it one-handed, especially when you're trying to reach the top of the screen like this. The control center is very difficult to reach, and so it is definitely a two-handed phone. And for me personally, I don't really like that, because when you're on the go, you want something quick that you can use on a day-to-day basis. This is something that's not really possible. In fact, sometimes there is even the fear that you might be dropping it because it's so big. So either you get like a case, but sometimes cases can make it pretty thick, so you kind of just have to deal with the size. On top of that, the size actually makes the main feature of the 14 Pro kind of obsolete. That new feature is of course the dynamic island. So if I open up music, right, and I play something, as you can see, as soon as I swipe up, the dynamic island expands. And the whole point of this is I can hold it down and open up a menu. Now with the 14 Pro, I could very easily do this with one hand. With this, it's extremely difficult to reach the top of the screen. So you really just cannot reach the dynamic island with one hand, and is again a two-handed motion. Something like that actually makes it a feature that you don't use as much, and it's kind of unfortunate because I do like the dynamic island. I think it is a very cool feature. It does look really nice and makes it look like a new iPhone, which I guess is the main thing anyways. However, big screen also means an extremely bright display. Like the 14 Pro, this goes up to 2000 nits of brightness outdoors, which is extremely bright and very good because you can see it. Now, arguably, because it's a bigger screen, that could take up more battery. However, I found that the battery inside of the 14 Pro Max is quite big and doesn't have much of an issue when it comes to brightness. The main problem is reachability, and if that is a serious issue for you and you prefer using the phone one-handed, I would not suggest buying the Max, and buy like a magnetic power bank or something for the 14 Pro. Now that we've covered the good, which is the battery life, and some of the bad, which is of course the size, there is one more thing we have to talk about, and that's ultimately why the Max is the best phone out of all the iPhones this year. So let's get into that. Time to talk about the real reason why you truly want an iPhone 14 Pro Max. But let's change the scenery one more time. Right, all green like the Predator behind me and like the Predator and Beast that this iPhone 14 Pro Max is. This phone is the top of the food chain out of all phones. If you're sitting on a table, as Flossie Carter says, you're going to destroy everyone around you. The display is so immersive. When you're watching all types of content, it's bright, it's vivid, it looks so good. In fact, even though it's the same display as the regular 14 Pro, it has OLED, it has 120Hz refresh rate, so when you're swiping, it's ultra smooth. And yes, it does have that always on display when I turn off the phone. However, going from 6.1 to 6.7 inches makes everything so much more immersive. In fact, I don't even like watching content on Netflix and Prime on my iPhone. I'm someone who just watches it on a TV, even avoiding my 16-inch MacBook Pro. However, I wouldn't even mind watching stuff on here because it's so good. Now, like I said, it is a big phone, and for those with big chunky sausage fingers, it might be easy for you to use. It's not as easy for me. However, that screen is probably a massive reason for me to stick to this. Also, the dynamic island, while it is the same size on the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, the Max makes it look a little bit more smaller because the phone is larger in scale. So a smaller dynamic island just is less of an intrusion in the display. Especially when you're watching YouTube videos and you zoom in to fill in the screen. I've noticed the island just looks really weird and off. I actually prefer the way the notch looked. The island looks more futuristic, but the notch just sort of, it just went through the display a little bit better. This looks like a random hole in the screen. 14 Pro Max, it's not that big of an intrusion. Like I said, the display's bigger, so the island looks smaller. So those are my thoughts on the 14 Pro Max. Again, some drawbacks being the size and difficulty and it being a little bit more cumbersome to use. However, the battery life being incredible on this thing and the display for me make this the best phone. Now, quick thing to mention, I did pick up some pretty cool accessories. One being the forest green Apple leather case, and I actually picked this one up simply because it keeps it slim and slender on the side, so it doesn't add more width to the phone, making it a little bit more easier to use. And this pretty cool MagSafe docking station where if you magnetically attach the phone, it charges it via MagSafe. So those accessories are from Belkin. I thought I'd mention those in case you wanted to pick them up. But generally, yeah, these are my thoughts on the new iPhone 14 Pro Max, and this is why I switched. Now, I did mention I'm going to be making a real day in the life video with these phones. I think that video is going to be a lot better now because it's going to have the 14 Pro Max and the 14 Pro. So do stay tuned for that video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Predator off a phone. Goodbye.